Hi, 2100 students. This week we're going to talk about what curriculum is, the advantages and disadvantages of digital curricula versus teacher-made curricula, what we can do to ensure that we have high quality curriculum. And really, this week's about solving the world's problems, right? Obviously, we have a lot of room for improvement in developing curriculum and then implementing and teaching that curriculum. And so in the reading that you did, you were exposed to a lot of the problems we have, but not a lot of the solutions. So today I want to share some of my experience in the classroom and what I have seen that has worked and hasn't worked, and then provide some ideas for directions you might go moving forward. So let's see here. First, what is curriculum? Here's the Google definition. The subjects comprising a course of study in school or college. So your content area, science curriculum, math curriculum, etc. However, it really is everything that goes into that as well. So when we talk about developing curriculum, it's what are the units within that content area? What are the day-to-day lessons? And ideally, we're going to use backwards design to come up with some SMART objectives first. What do we want to accomplish and map those to state standards? Then based on that, what kind of materials do we need to go over? What is the curriculum that will help us to get to those ends? And so if we want to raise test scores, we need to understand what is being expected of us first, and then find effective ways of engaging our students with that curriculum. Okay. So what's better, a teacher-made or digital curriculum? I loved reading your responses, your reflection responses to this week. Some of you saw that, oh yeah, there's some really great things about having a digital curriculum. And some of you got really angry about it, which I totally get. Now, full disclosure, I picked this particular article about a digital curriculum because I think there are some really positive things about having a curriculum that's just handed to you and is created for you. However, my personal feeling is a teacher-made curriculum in concert with other teachers. So as we collaborate and create a curriculum together, utilizing resources that might be handed to you or provided by the state, etc., that's the ideal. So it's really going to be a hybrid of these models. However, there are very, very few articles about the benefits of a digital curriculum. So I found one made by a company that creates a digital curriculum. And when I found this article online, I had to cut out a lot of the references to their own software that they're creating and the curriculum that they're developing to make a profit. So I just took that off the article and didn't include that when I converted it to a PDF. But some of you kind of picked up on that this seems like it's by someone who's trying to sell something, and it definitely was. But that doesn't mean that what they wrote about wasn't, true, at least part of it. There are some benefits of the digital curriculum. So let's get into some of the pros and cons of both a teacher-made and a digital curriculum. As we saw in the article, some of the nice things about a digital curriculum is that it's well researched, it's well thought through. In many cases, it is already tied to state standards. So from an administrator's standpoint, a digital curriculum makes a lot of sense because it's going to ensure the coverage model, which is not always the best way to look at education, but we're ensuring that the most important things get taught. And so that is a huge benefit. Also, the time needed to develop curriculum, if you can pay someone to do that rather than doing it yourself, sometimes that is a worthy trade, right? So we don't have time to develop our own. Let's have someone else develop it for us. And historically, here in the United States, most curriculum is created in advance and then adopted by a school or a grade or a content area. And so this idea of a digital curriculum, we might say it's not always been digital, but a pre-made curriculum by a curriculum company, a Pearson or something like that. That's how we've done education for a long time. And part of the reason we've done it for a long time is it saves schools and districts money, it saves teachers and administrators time, and it ensures some fidelity, that people are teaching the same thing in close to the same way, and that they're covering the things that are important. Those are all really good reasons for a digital curriculum or a pre-made curriculum. Now, of course, the cons or the downside of that is it doesn't differentiate instruction. It doesn't look at the individual needs of your student or your classroom or even your district. And so if you do have needs, or if, you know, in the other article where it talks about how we're not teaching things appropriate to the grade level, and I'll talk more about that later, a digital curriculum is horrible for stuff like that, because maybe everyone in your class has already learned that thing, and then you're teaching it again just because it's in the curriculum. Well, what a waste of time. And we do waste a ton of time in public schools reteaching and reteaching things that are either inconsequential or are already understood by our students. So that's one of the big cons of having a pre-made curriculum. There are a lot of other cons, but I'll get to that as I talk about teacher-made curriculum. And teacher-made curriculum is just the flip of digital. The pros is you can really focus on the needs of your students. It forces the teacher to really understand the content, which is great. And because as you develop curriculum, you come up with ideas for how to teach that curriculum. And so developing your own curriculum can be really, really helpful. The flip side to that, or the downside, is it takes a ton of time. It takes energy, and teachers are overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. And so it's really hard to prioritize those things. Now, in the other article, or one of the other articles, it talks about the importance of having collaboration, professional development, teacher work days, so that we can develop curriculum, but also so that we can teach the curriculum we already have effectively. And I do believe that that is important. My own experience with curriculum is kind of a mixed bag. I feel like for brand new teachers that are overwhelmed and having a hard time keeping up, having a curriculum that we can simply hand them is a great way to help them out. It's not the best way to develop curriculum, in my opinion, but it's great for new teachers or any teacher who's trying something new or feels overwhelmed. I know here at SUU, one of the things we do for our curriculum in higher education is each course has what is called a course steward that helps develop the curriculum for that course. And if another teacher wants to teach that course, they certainly can, but they're going to be handed at least a course outline, some sort of syllabus or Canvas shell that has something to get them started. Then if they want to make changes, they negotiate that with the course steward, the person who helped develop it in the first place. That is, as new faculty, that's super helpful for me, having a structure to do things. Now, in this class that I'm teaching right now, that was the case. Somebody already developed the course and made it the way they want it. But I'm finding that I really like this teacher-made curriculum model. And so I'm going through the whole course a week at a time, trying to get ahead, and we're getting there. But I'm changing a lot of things. There were readings that I didn't feel were as useful or as relevant or as timely. There were particular assignments that I felt similar about. And so I have changed a lot of things, still fitting within the structure that was already designed. But I like this hybrid model for myself personally. Now, as was noted in several of the articles, curriculum needs to be constantly revised and updated. And what I have found as a teacher, where I love teaching the most, is when I have taught something several times, I have tweaked it according to the needs of my students, or just what I've seen generally with trends and the way my students respond to the material. And once I've taught it 3 or 4 times and I come up with activities that I really like, then being a teacher becomes so fun, because I feel more comfortable and competent in instructing the class, but also that curriculum has been kind of refined to better meet the needs of the students. And so I think the ideal here is a hybrid model. Now, in the Tunnel article, she said a lot of interesting things. Let me just point a few out. An effective curriculum is critical support that guides teachers in preparing lessons and points to quality resources to help students learn. The most effective curriculums, and I agree with this, are developed collaboratively continually evaluated and improved, and reflect the community's values and align with state and national learning standards. I'm totally on board with that. So let's pull that apart a little bit. When you start a new curriculum, let me get my face out of the way so you can read the comment here. You start with a syllabus. Now, if you're teaching kindergarten, you're not going to hand a syllabus to your students. You might give them a form where they have to have their parents sign that says these are kind of the classroom expectations and norms. But all teachers develop a curriculum map for their class. And in higher education, it's nice because that is manifest on an actual course syllabus where we give it to you and it talks about the expectations for the class. Maybe it talks about communication. Maybe it has office hours. Maybe it has a breakdown of what the assignments are and things like that. Now, a syllabus does not need to include all of the learning activities for the whole semester, but it should provide a general overview. And as a curriculum map, that's helpful for us as teachers to stay on track, but it's also helpful for the students. And there's actually been a lot of research that has shown that teachers that provide a well thought out syllabus and organized syllabus are more effective than teachers who do not have that. Now, you know from being in this class that I gave you a partial syllabus to start the semester because this class is in flux and it's being evolved. It's evolving as we go throughout the semester. So I fully expect that when it comes to student evaluations and things like that, some of you are going to be really frustrated and wish that it was further along than it is. And that, honestly, that's really frustrating and difficult for me too. I'm doing the best I can. But we know that having a well-planned curriculum map can have a significant impact on student progress and the quality of teachers. And I totally believe that, which is why I put it on this slide, right? So it's in the syllabus. What goes into developing a syllabus? There's so much. But again, when we go back to that digital versus teacher made, hopefully a lot of the work's been done for you. And as a teacher, what you're doing is refining the course. So when you develop a syllabus, you think about your own values. What do you think is most important? And this is where teaching becomes a little bit subjective. Each class is a little different. Now, in higher education, we have more teaching autonomy or freedom to teach what we want in the way we want than you might have in an elementary school classroom. And so it might be that you go to teach at an elementary level and the syllabus is given to you and it's expected that you follow it to the letter. That can be really frustrating, especially if you disagree with the way things are being taught. However, there are things you can do to revise and to tweak and to work with your team and your administrators to make it what you want. I pulled up an example here. This was actually part of the syllabus that was handed off to me in this class. And you see, as we look at this slide, there are a lot of awesome things here that we didn't cover in the last 2 weeks. So this is just last week and this week. Describing and measuring learning, the specific topic, can learning be measured? I kept that, and that was the point of the class. When we look at these anchors, one of the articles I assigned, the other one I didn't, because I didn't feel like it met your needs as well. So I didn't assign it. This teach-in model was an assignment that I changed. And so we didn't do it. Now in my face-to-face class, we did some teaching back and forth. So we did an adapted version of this, but online, you're going to get your next major course assignment next week. And so I just eliminated it from these 2 weeks. With the Bloom's taxonomy, we went over that last week. And then I didn't use, there was a document that had trigger words and things like that. I included that in part of my lecture, but I didn't use that document. So you see, I've kind of just tweaked things and I've made it more to my style. So here's my version on the syllabus. And you see the learning objectives are kind of the same. They're very similar here. And in what I expect you to do, having assigned these 3 articles or 2 articles in a video, and then looking at this week's, these 3 articles, it's similar, but I kind of simplified it a little bit. And this is a personal preference of just the way I have organized things. And so there's not a right or a wrong way, but I hope you see by me showing this example that teachers do have some control in the structure and the curriculum of their course. Now, in the other article that talked about the effective curriculum, I like these. Adapts to an evolving world. That means that it has to change from time to time. It has to be updated, just like I showed. Contains research-based teaching techniques. Most teachers are not in a place where they can do that on the fly. They're not continually learning all the other things. That's why having this opportunity to take classes and to learn about the research right now is so important, because then at least you're semi-current on what the most current models are for effective instruction. Encourages collaboration, and that's with, when we think about the different stakeholders in education, it's teachers collaborating with other teachers, it's teachers collaborating with administrators, but then you've got the school board involved as well, maybe even local businesses and political entities. There's a lot that goes into developing a curriculum because it's culturally based, and there are things that are important here in Utah that might be less important in New York City or vice versa. And so it really needs that collaboration. Meets the needs of the student, and that's connected to the earlier point, and then has quantifiable objectives. And we really try to start with those objectives. I did want to point out just one tweak I made this week is in our, this is just a template I made that I copy and paste when I'm creating quizzes. And for our course preparation reflection, the thing you do after you've read the articles, watched the videos, you have these 2 prompts. And I added 1 line to it this week because I don't feel like I was meeting your needs. And so I've added, do you have any questions or topics you want to further explore? And I think I changed it from in class to just explore further. And that way I can respond to your reflections in these lecture videos a little more effectively. Now, I am reading your reflections and I'm trying to respond the best I can. But I think by adding this 1 extra line, it's going to require more work for me as I sift through your reflections and I take notes on a separate document and then prepare this lecture. But I do feel like it will meet your needs better. So just wanted to show an example of adapting and evolving that curriculum. Now, finally, and we'll go through this pretty quick, ensuring high quality curriculum. What can teachers do? And this is the hardest thing, so we know we need to improve curriculum, but aren't a lot of the decisions about curriculum up to administrators or school boards? So what can teachers actually do? In the FOO article, you read about how COVID led to a significant learning decreases in this nationally, 30% in math and reading. And some of you kind of picked up on this as well, but that particular research study that came up with those findings was looking at school districts in Chicago or LA, other big cities. And so when we look at national averages, it's slightly different. And when we compare that to what happened in Utah, that's slightly different. So I'm covering up the prompt here, but what do you think about Utah? How was Utah impacted by COVID? And you might think, well, we did really well here, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that is the case. However, a quick Google search found this information for you. So Utah's 4th grade math and reading scores were actually in line with what happened nationally. We did see some significant declines for 4th graders in reading and math. However, look at the second paragraph. It's awesome. When it came to 8th grade scores, Utah was the only state to not see a significant drop in reading and math scores, which we already know this. It's publicized throughout the state. Utah did not have the same declines over COVID academically, and some of that makes sense. We weren't out of the classroom as long as other states that were like a year and a half totally online. And so it just makes sense that there's going to be less learning loss when you're physically in class with your teacher. There were also things that happened politically in the state that made it easier for people to adjust during COVID. And some of this is anecdotal, but talking to my friends around the country, I'm amazed with how crazy it was during that time, and grateful that I live here where we found some normalcy relatively quickly in relation to other places. And so we did okay. Some of the problems identified, and I think I'll just go through these. The next slide says, what can we do about it? So I'm just going to go through these one at a time. In my face-to-face class, we got into groups, and the groups actually researched this and looked it up. But for you, I'm just going to give you my take so you can think about it and hopefully reflect on it in your lecture reflection. But think about these. What can teachers actually do? And if you have some suggestions, I'd love to hear about those in your lecture reflections. So the first one, we just were talking about learning loss. So over COVID, learning loss happens over weekends, right? If you go to school on Friday and over the weekend you forget stuff and you come back Monday and you don't quite remember as much. So that's always been a problem, but over COVID it was significant because we were out of schools for a much longer period of time, longer than we've seen in decades. And so what can we do in the future? What if we have another pandemic? Or actually every summer, there's significant learning loss as our students go home for the summer. What can we do? Well, I don't have all the solutions here. And unfortunately, we're limited in some regards. So it makes sense to have a summer reading program or to assign reading over the weekend, But when we look at the opportunity or achievement gap, some students don't have the same opportunities for doing things like that over the summer. If you're in a lower socioeconomic group, you might not have opportunities for reading programs and having tutors and going to summer camp because financially you can't do it, but also you might not have the time because maybe you're helping support your own family and you're working over the summers and you're doing other things, or maybe your parents are absent from the home, so the stability of the home impacts learning. And as they're gone and not supporting you and continuing to learn, that's tricky. So can we require anything of families over the summer? Well, it's really difficult to do that. Can we encourage? Absolutely. And so one solution is encourage your students over the summer. Here are some good things to do. Over the weekend, here are some good things to do. And so we can encourage. And I'll probably come back to this a little later because I have a few other thoughts. Grading appropriate curriculum might be, grade appropriate curriculum. Probably should have a hyphen in there. Not being taught to most students. So this is one where I would need to dig in deeper, but I think this article was a very small sample size. And when they talk about 6 months of the year teaching inappropriate things or non-grade level, well, there's only 9 months in an academic year. That means 2/3 of the time they're teaching the wrong things. That just doesn't sit right with me. I don't think that that's true in most places. However, this is going to be true in all places, that some of the stuff that we teach was already taught by someone else, or that we didn't teach something that needs to be taught before moving on. Now, in my own experience, one way to deal with this is collaboration, which we're going to get to more in number 4. But if I'm teaching 2nd grade and I want to make sure that my students are learning the right things, I need to talk to the 1st grade teachers. We need to have meetings where we collaborate together and go over what did you teach them last year. So at the end of an academic year, you might want to meet with the grade that's before you and also the grade that's after you, so you can share that information with them. We've done that at schools I've been at, and it's really effective. You're going to have a curriculum map that's probably going to be on a document, and it shows what was learned, because curriculum often spirals throughout a school where you learn it here and you return to it at some later point. And so making sure that the communication's open with all stakeholders there and that you're collaborating and developing the curriculum makes a big difference. And number 3, lack of funds to purchase high quality curriculum. Obviously, this is a huge issue. Going back to the opportunity gap, some schools can do this, others can't. And there's a reason why some schools test really high and other schools don't. And somebody brought this up in their reflection, that part of the problem is a cultural problem, right? So in some districts where they don't have the same funds, they also don't have the same desire to succeed in school. In certain cultures, it's not expected that you go to college and that you get good grades and things like that. And so teachers in those districts are fighting an uphill battle. Can teachers do anything in a situation like that where there's not as much enthusiasm for learning and for grades and for things like that? Well, of course there is. That's what great teachers do, is they inspire their students regardless of their background. Now, it is more difficult, but there's a lot that teachers can do to change mindsets. I know this because I benefited from a teacher who was very different from the way I was raised. It got me asking questions in a new way. It got me seeing the world in a new way. And so that teacher inspired me to look at things differently and ultimately influenced the direction I went career-wise and in many other areas of my life. So as teachers, let's do the best job we can to inspire our students and to make them aware of opportunities. And if there aren't funds, maybe we should fight for funds. You can be on the curriculum committee, on the budget committee. You could go to school board meetings. You can fight for those things. In other cases, you can get them yourself. I've written grant proposals and been awarded grants to do more things with my students. I've worked with local businesses to sponsor things that I'm doing in my class. And then there are a bunch of programs online where you can apply for funds. And so there are opportunities. Also, just working within the budget of your school, there often are opportunities to develop or to purchase a curriculum if you just move funds around. Lack of collaboration, teacher to teacher and teachers with administrators. This one's actually a difficult one for me. Sometimes I really like working in a silo. I like doing my own thing. I feel like I'm a pretty good teacher and I like the way I do things. But it's important to interact with your colleagues and with your administrators to make sure you're on the same page, that you have a shared vision. So if that collaboration isn't happening, you can propose it. And one of the reasons Utah did better over COVID is we decided that it was worthwhile to collaborate. And so funding was made available to have more teacher work days than we've ever had. And so there were days where students didn't come to school, but teachers did. And as teachers came to school, they did professional development and they worked in FLCs, faculty learning communities, to develop curriculum. And over COVID and the year right after, 2020 and 2021, there were a lot of those work days. That has been scaled back because there's an expense associated with that. Plus, it's inconvenient for families. But I think continuing to prioritize teacher work days and meeting with your FLCs is really important. So, and that ties in with number 5, teacher professional development. Some teachers get a lot of professional development because they prioritize it and they go to workshops and they go to conferences and they talk to other teachers and ask them what they're doing. Some teachers, unfortunately, it's often the highest paid teachers, people who've been around for forever, giving minimal effort. They don't do any of those things unless they're required. And so one way to improve this is to make sure everyone has those opportunities and sometimes require those opportunities. So let's make sure that we're having a professional development day. That often happens the 2 weeks before school starts, but you can do it throughout the year and you can look for ways to make that work. And the last one, lack of teaching incentives to use the curriculums provided. This was something brought up in the article that I don't know if I fully buy into what was being said here, that they said like 50 or 60% of principals don't think that their teachers are using their curriculum or they don't have any reason to. I don't think that's true. I think in most cases, you start with a curriculum and then you adapt it, as we mentioned earlier with digital versus teacher-led. And so I don't know, but if this is a problem, if the curriculum's not being used, there are a lot of incentives that you can give teachers, to work with each other, give them more time to work together, give them teacher work days, give them professional development, give them opportunities to go develop things, whether it's during school, maybe have a special or a teacher that can come in while teachers work on something together. There's a lot that can happen there, but you have to have administrators on board. So it's having a good relationship with administrators first. All right. Obviously, this is a lecture, and I feel like I've been talking a lot to digest here. If you have some solutions to these problems, I'd love to hear about it in your reflection. I think I put that on this. Nope, I didn't put a last slide. So you can just type that. Also, if you have any other questions or concerns, you can add that to your reflection as well. Hope you're having a great week and have a great weekend. All right. Bye.